Hello there, this is L24 World News, and these are your headlines. Hundreds of people stormed the government's palace in Iraq on Monday, sparking deadly battles that have further engulfed the nation in a political unrest. After rival faction battled across Libya's capital in the worst fighting there in 2 years, Libya is divided again and back toward violence. As UN watchdog inspectors head to the nuclear plant, Ukraine launches southern offensive in the Kherson region. Torrential monsoon rains have triggered flash floods across Pakistan, leaving more than 6 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. Good afternoon, I'm your host, Abdurrahim Kashur, and those were today's top stories. First in our topic on news, Muqtada al-Sadr has ordered his followers to withdraw from the government palace after protests triggered violent clashes between his supporters and security forces, resulting in the death of more than 32 people and hundreds wounded. Islam Seed.
Violence erupted between followers of Muqtada al-Sadr and security forces in Baghdad. Gunshots echoes in the capital sky. RPGs fired, turning Iraq's green zone into a battlefield.
We've been living in humiliation and suffering for 20 years. They attacked us. We're protesting peacefully since day one until today.
The clashes occurred after the Iraqi leader announced on Monday that he would resign from Iraqi politics for good. The decision that triggered his followers to storm the government palace, sparking clashes with security forces in which dozens of protesters were killed and hundreds injured.
It's as if they have cotton in their ears. We asked for reforms. We asked them to back down. They did not. They did nothing. They are not cornered. We don't want them.
Whether we are here or not near the palace, the revolution will continue. I received an injury. My hand is fractured. I'm going to get treatment and come back.
In a news conference later on Tuesday, Muqtada al-Sadr has ordered his supporters to withdraw from the green zone to prevent spilling more blood. A nationwide curfew has been lifted after the military announced it, and the caretaker premier suspended cabinet sessions in response to the violence. Iran has closed its borders with Iraq and urged its citizens to avoid traveling there. According to officials, Muqtada al-Sadr has been going on a hunger strike until violence and the use of weapons ends. His sudden resignation has thrown Iraq into a turmoil with no clear path out. However, it was the first time that his followers have attempted to breach the palace since thousands of them stormed Iraq's parliament to prevent Sad's rivals from forming a government.
In the same line of thought, Algeria has expressed its deep concern about the developments in Iraq and the serious manifestations of violence that have resulted from it, according to a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and National Community abroad. Likewise, the United Nations, the Arab League, Russia, Germany and France warned against the situation in Iraq sliding into more violence, chaos and bloodshed, calling all parties to give priority to the national interest to overcome the current situation. And now let's get a little background on Muqtada al-Sadr. He has been a prominent figure in Iraqi politics for a long time. His movement is one of the most powerful factions with hundreds of thousands of supporters. The Shiite leader rose to prominence after the end of Saddam Hussein's leadership back in 2003. He's against any foreign interference in Iraq's politics. He demanded the departure of American troops and opposes Iran's influence in the country. After almost a year of relative peace in Libya, the struggle for the power in country has risen again after Bashagha's militias attempted to enter Tripoli for control and street fighting left several deaths. This has risen the question again whether Libya is on the brink of another civil war. Hussam Ayadi.
After 2 years of relative peace, fighting has returned to the Libyan capital, as at least 37 people have been killed in street battles between rival militias in central Tripoli. Beiba's government of national unity has accused its unrecognized rival government, which is backed by the eastern camping country. Beiba's government consolidation of power, highlighted by its ability to eliminate powerful actors, including Libya's oil chief, means that unseating it through military force will be a matter of life and death for the pro-Bashar coalition, which views this as the only viable way to ensure its own relevance.
We will not leave this country to the miscreants. Be sure this is our country. This is Tripoli. We defend it with dignity and pride. As for you, thank God you're safe. And as for those who were killed, wish them God's mercy. When they saw our city Tripoli in peace, they were jealous.
The situation is escalating the dispute about who should govern the North African country. The forces are divided between those who support the government of national unity in Tripoli, which is recognized by the United Nations, and the militias who back a rival parliament based in the eastern city of Tobruk.
Those who think they can stage a coup, we can tell them the coup era has now passed, and those who want elections, we are ready for elections. We're not moving forward unless we go to elections. And if they want otherwise, we have men.
For months, the Eastern Militias administration's prime minister has tried to enter the capital and impose his authority. However, he never succeeded. Years of negotiation, mediation and ceasefire have failed to bring peace following the removal of former leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, which was the start of an endless war that has torn the oil-rich country. Many international powers have attempted to intervene in the political situation in Libya. However, it is apparently one more factor, if not the most important, that is triggering the country into more of an unstable situation that has been moving to the worst, especially after the gas crisis that has turned most of the eyes to the Libyan gas.
And from Libya to Algeria, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, received today, Tuesday, the President of Guinea-Bissau, Omaro Sissoko Embalo, at the headquarters of the Presidency of the Republic. The President of Guinea-Bissau had arrived in Algeria yesterday evening on an official visit, where he was received at Houari Boumediene International Airport by Prime Minister Ayman Ben Abdurrahman and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Ramtane Lamamra. After successfully completing the working visit to Algeria, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his delegation have returned to Ethiopia. Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune received Ethiopian Prime Minister on Monday at the headquarters of the Presidency of the Republic. Abiy Ahmed expressed his country's interest in the Algerian experience in the pharmaceutical industry. Japan promised close collaboration with Africa in order to promote a more resilient economy there in the face of crises and epidemics and more security on the continent undermined by wars and terrorism during a summit in Tunis. This theme was developed at the length by Senegalese President and current President of the African Union, Macky Sall, claiming that mentalities change.
Together we have defined the programs of the continent, in particular on the communication infrastructures, since the ZLECA, which is the continental free trade area, cannot prosper, can only develop intra-African trade when the countries can communicate with each other. This question of infrastructures, like that of energies, are essential questions for the development of Africa.
Cette question de l'infrastructure comme celle de l'énergie sont des questions essentielles pour le développement de l'Afrique.
The granddaughter of former Lebanese president and ex-diplomat announced on Monday her candidacy country's upcoming presidential election on a platform critical of Hezbollah. The country's political woes are compounded by crippling economic crisis, which the World Bank says it is the worst worldwide in over a century. Tracy Chauman criticized Hezbollah's influential role in politics and security, its arms, and its impact on Lebanese relations with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states.
Lebanon cannot continue without holding on to its sovereignty and independence. and without creating a clear defense strategy. These aren't slogans, but necessities. And as Lebanon cannot only be ruled by one side, the country's decisions on war and peace cannot be decided outside the framework of the official institutions.
Amidst this devastating situation caused by floods in much of Pakistan, many countries have started sending aid for the torn country. After a plea made the Army Chief of Staff, the aid that has started to reach the affected areas were mostly sent by Turkey and China. Humanitarian relief supplies were sent on Monday for a country that is mostly drowning.
Is awash in suffering. The Pakistani people are facing a monsoon on steroids, the relentless impact of epochal levels of rain and flooding. The climate catastrophe has killed more than 1,000 people, with many more injured. Millions are homeless, schools and health facilities have been destroyed, livelihoods are shattered, critical infrastructure wiped out, and people's hopes and dreams have washed away. In response to the devastation, the government of Pakistan has released funds, including immediate cash relief. But the scale of needs is rising like the floodwaters, and it requires the world's collective and prioritized attention.
Distraught Pakistanis displaced from their homes by devastating floods, struggling to comprehend the destruction brought on their lives. Flash floods triggered by heavy monsoon rains across much of Pakistan have killed over 1,000 people and injured and displaced thousands more since mid-June.
The floodwaters damaged my mud house. My children are small and my husband died. Right now I can't buy clothes, medicines or food because I have nothing. I am living with the help of Allah.
As a measure against the floods, Pakistani Prime Minister Mohammad Shahbaz Sharif announced a $45 million relief fund for the flood-hit Balochistan province. Pakistani Prime Minister's office showed Sharif dropping relief supplies to residents of the Jafarabad district from a helicopter as part of a mission by the Pakistani military.
From the central government, I announced a grant of 10 billion rupees for the Balochistan province.
Pakistan's military chief appealed to the international community to come forward and help Pakistan following a deadly monsoon season. General Qamar Javed Bajwa gave the plea as he visited flood-affected areas in the southern Sindh province to help with relief work.
I appeal to my Pakistani benefactors, come forward and help your brothers who are having a very difficult time. We're trying our best, and as I said earlier, the federal government, provincial government, and armed forces resources are limited. Come forward in any way you want to help, donating financially or with relief goods.
Soldiers and rescue workers have evacuated stranded residents to the safety of relief camps and provided food to thousands of displaced Pakistanis. The government has deployed soldiers to help civilian authorities in rescue and relief operations across the country.
Martin Griffiths, the UN humanitarian chief, told the United Nations Security Council that Afghanistan faces multiple crises and that the donors should immediately provide $770 million to help Afghans survive the coming colder months.
Afghanistan is a humanitarian crisis, but it's not only that. It's an economic crisis. It's a climate crisis. It's a hunger crisis. It's a financial crisis, but it is not a hopeless crisis. There are many musts, Mr. President, but there are many opportunities. The path is clear and the dangers equally so. The people of Afghanistan are still there. They have shown incredible resilience over the decades and in this last year. Our task is to help them to prosper, to flourish, and to be safe.
Heavy rain that fell into the early hours of Sunday morning caused deadly flooding in Freetown, the port city of the capital, Sierra Leone. At least 8 people were reportedly killed later on. Monday, the bodies were retrieved by emergency services. The fatalities occurred when a mudslide destroyed 2 houses located on a steep slope in the hills above the Kisi neighborhood. Floodwaters forced evacuations in northern India as the swollen river Ganges flooded residents on Monday. Homes were partially submerged in floodwaters and people were seen wading through waist-deep waters in the city of Varanasi in India's Uttar Pradesh state. Ukrainian president vows to push Russia's military back to the border as advisors claim Ukrainian troops have breached front line in several places, and Ukrainian troops have broken through Russian defenses in several areas of the front line near the city of Kherson, according to a senior advisor to Zelensky.
The plenary session of the National Electoral Commission proclaims the President of the Republic of Angola, João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, head of the list of the political party most voted in the general elections for August 24, 2022.
Russia's defense ministry announced the launch of military exercises in the country's east. China, India, Nicaragua, Algeria, Syria, and a number of other countries will be involved in the Vostok 2022 drills beginning from September the 1st to the 7th. In a wide-ranging speech at Charles University in Prague, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said he is committed to the enlargement of the European Union. The Chancellor said that Qinghai areas were one of the greatest achievements of the European Union, which should be protected and expanded. The leader also voiced the challenge of rising gas and electricity prices.
Schengen is one of the greatest achievements of the European Union, which we should protect and expand. This also includes closing existing gaps.
The Biden administration plans to ask the U.S. Congress to approve an estimated $1.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan, including 60 anti-ship missiles and 100 air-to-air missiles, Politico reported on Monday, citing sources amid heightened tension with China. China carried out its largest war games around the democratically governed island after a visit this month by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Beijing has not ruled out using force to bring the island under its control. China's southern city of Shenzhen shut down the world's largest electronics market and suspended public transport. Nearby, the authorities enforced neighborhood-wide lockdowns in response to a small number of COVID cases. The busy shopping area, home to thousands of stalls selling computers, components, mobile phone parts, and microchip, is among 3 neighborhoods placed under mandatory 4-day lockdown. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of the capital, Port-au-Prince, on Monday to demand the resignation of Prime Minister Ariel Henry. It is the second such protest this month in the country, as last week thousands of people marched in several cities of the country to call for the ousting of the Prime Minister. Angola's Electoral Commission on Monday announced that the ruling People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola MPLA party leader João Lourenço as the winner in the presidential election that took place last week. The MPLA received 51.17% of votes in last week, while the longtime opposition party, the Union for the Total Independence of Angola, known as UNITA, secured 44% of the vote.
The plenary session of the National Electoral Commission proclaims the President of the Republic of Angola, João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, head of the list of the political party most voted in the general elections for August 24, 2022.
Nas eleições gerais de 24 de agosto de 2022.
According to results issued Monday by Electoral Commission, the victory extends the MPLA's 47-year winning streak and comes amid rising disappointment with the party and the state of affairs in the southern African country. Only about 6.4 million of the 40 million Angolans who registered the vote did so, according to the Electoral Commission.
A comunidade internacional reconhece estas eleições como tendo sido livres, justas.
The international community recognizes these elections as having been free, fair, and transparent. This is another victory for Angola and Angolans in general. Be well, everyone. Long live Angola. Long live MPLA. MPLA, peace, democracy, and development. Thank you very much.
Paz, democracia e desenvolvimento. Muito obrigado.
And now for more international news, let's follow this roundup by Marimzia.
A 21-year-old man died after being stabbed at Notting Hill Carnival, according to the Metropolitan Police. They began a murder investigation and said hundreds of police were in the immediate vicinity at the time. The victim was stabbed in the Ladbroke Grove under the Westway flyover at about 8 p.m. on Monday. He later died in a West London hospital. An Australian court on Tuesday found a former high school teacher who was the subject of the hit podcast The Teacher's Pet guilty of murdering his wife 40 years ago, after public attention triggered renewed interest in the case. The guilty verdict marks a dramatic conclusion to a cold case that has gripped Australia since the 2018 podcast put pressure on police to revisit their investigation. Lynette's brother Greg Sims told media outside the court that he felt his sister's name had been cleared with the verdict. Workers around the UK are continuing to strike in protest of rising inflation as the cost of living increases. Following the first bus strike in the capital the previous weekend, around 1,600 bus drivers in London went on strike between August 27 and 28. And according to a report, millions of people in the UK won't use their heating this winter as a result of increased energy costs. African countries called for an end to a climate injustice, saying the continent causes less than 4% of global CO2 emissions, but pays one of the highest prices for global warming. Government officials, international organizations, NGOs from more than 60 African nations attended Monday's opening of Africa Climate Week in Gabon's capital to prepare for the COP27 UN Climate Conference in Egypt in November.
NASA postponed its Artemis launch Monday after issues emerged during countdown, delaying the debut of its towering rocket and its long-awaited mission to the moon. NASA has backup launch dates scheduled for September the 2nd and the 5th, but officials during a press conference couldn't say whether the engine issue will be fixed before either of those dates. Melissa Khimilat.
A successful test would represent a higher jump for NASA's Artemis mission, aiming to return astronauts to the lunar surface after 50 years, and one day even to carry them to Mars. But blastoff never happened.
This is Artemis Launch Control with an update. Launch Director Charlie Blackwell-Thompson has called a scrub for today.
The U.S. Space Agency cited a problem on one of the rocket's main engines, as launch teams began a test that would have cooled the engines for liftoff, but one would not cool as expected.
This is a brand new rocket. It's not going to fly until it's ready.
NASA Administrator Bill Nelson said that last-minute snags and cancellations were a standard part of what he called the space business. The mission called Artemis 1 calls for a 6-week uncrewed test flight of the Orion space capsule around the moon and back to Earth for a splashdown in the Pacific. Announced as the most powerful complex rocket in the world, the Space Launch System represents the biggest new vertical launch system NASA has built since the Saturn V rocket flown during the Apollo missions that landed the first humans on the moon, more than a half-century ago. The Artemis mission, named after Apollo's twin sister in Greek mythology, seeks to eventually return humans to the moon and establish a long-term lunar base there, to be used as a stepping stone to even more ambitious astronaut voyages to Mars. NASA officials say that goal is probably decades away. Shorter term, officials on Monday said they hope to try again in 96 hours and make a second launch attempt on Friday.
We're going back to the moon, but we're going to live and learn and develop new technologies because we're eventually going to Mars.
That's all we have for now. Thank you so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media pages as it is seen in the screen. Bye bye and have a blessed day.